Hi everyone. Today myself, Kennedy, and Pacow will be talking to you about an aspect of metabolism that's involved in several processes of plants and animals, and that is carbon dioxide. We'll be informing you guys about how carbon dioxide is generated in the Krebs cycle in animals and how it's released from the body, which is then used in photosynthesis for the metabolism of plants, algae, and cyanobacteria. You could probably see how important carbon dioxide is by this diagram, because it shows how carbon dioxide comes full circle by being produced in some metabolic processes while being consumed in others. Thus, it's required for our survival. Regulation of carbon dioxide is also vital for the environment because it's a greenhouse gas that warms the atmosphere, affecting temperature and other aspects of life. So there are many reasons that it exists within organisms and the surrounding environment. So, let's start by looking at processes leading up to and during the Krebs cycle within the body. To create carbon dioxide, carbon atoms are combined with oxygen, and these formations occur once before the Krebs cycle and in two different areas within the cycle, because for each pyruvate molecule, there are 3 carbon dioxides produced at various parts of the respiration pathway. The first production of carbon dioxide leading up to the Krebs cycle is generated by converting pyruvate to acetyl-CoA by oxidative decarboxylation. This irreversible step is done using the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex and coenzyme A, which causes the removal of a carbon and 2 oxygens from the pyruvate molecule. Next, carbon dioxide production occurs for a second time during conversion of isocitrate to alpha-ketoglutarate through an intermediate called oxalosuccinate. This step is also an oxidative decarboxylation step, as well as the last step I will be talking about in a minute. Through the transformation of oxalosuccinate to alpha-ketoglutarate, carbon dioxide is freed from the intermediate molecule. This conversion that causes the release of another carbon dioxide uses isocitrate dehydrogenase. And finally, our last generation of carbon dioxide in the cycle occurs with alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase, which converts alpha-ketoglutarate to succinyl-CoA. This is similar to the pyruvate dehydrogenase reaction since coenzyme A comes in to attach to the molecule, releasing carbon dioxide from alpha-ketoglutarate. Because these carbon dioxide byproducts are created each time the body undergoes aerobic respiration, they need to be taken out of the body for reasons which will be explained, which brings us to its release. Kennedy will further explain this for you guys.
During cellular respiration, the concentration of carbon dioxide increases within a cell. This pushes CO2 out of the tissue cell and into the blood where it can do 2 things: dissolve in the plasma or diffuse into the red blood cell. Most of the CO2 chooses to diffuse into the red blood cell where it then has another choice: either bind to hemoglobin forming carboaminohemoglobin or react with water to form bicarbonate. The enzyme carbonic anhydrase catalyzes this reaction to form bicarbonate and hydrogen ions within a red blood cell. The reaction shown is reversible but is pushed to the right due to high concentration of CO2 gathered from cellular respiration. The bicarbonate generated in the red blood cell is then diffused back into the plasma and circulates to the lungs. This isn't bicarbonate's only function, however. It also acts as an important pH buffer to keep blood slightly alkaline. The hydrogen ions also play an interesting role in the red blood cell as well. When the hemoglobin is saturated with oxygen and reaches the tissues, the H+ ions will bind to hemoglobin, which trigger the release of oxygen into the blood and then back into the tissues. This sort of highlights carbon dioxide's importance in the body, even though it is considered waste. Continuing its path in the bloodstream, bicarbonate reaches the lung capillaries in the alveoli, where the CO2 concentration is low due to expiration. This drives the equation seen previously in the opposite direction, causing bicarbonate to be converted back into CO2 and then diffuses into the alveoli to finally be expelled out of the body through expiration. This shift in equilibrium also detaches H+ ions from the hemoglobin, preparing red blood cells to be saturated with oxygen yet again. CO2's function in the body is not just waste, but serves as an important stimulus for ventilation rate. In a healthy person, hypercapnia, or increased carbon dioxide levels in the blood, is the most important stimulus for regulating ventilation. This is because it more accurately measures metabolic activity compared to oxygen levels. Even with an increase of metabolism, Oxygen levels stay roughly the same at all times because of ample storage in the red blood cells. When hypercapnia occurs, chemoreceptors in the medulla oblongata send signals to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, telling them to contract and relax at a faster rate, thus increasing respiration and expelling more carbon dioxide. With any waste product, too much of it can become problematic. Choking, diseases like COPD, or even just holding your breath can cause a buildup of CO2 in the lungs, which causes it to diffuse back into the blood. This causes the blood pH to become more acidic as CO2 dissolves in the plasma and also gets converted back into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. The increase in acidity causes respiratory acidosis in the body, which is categorized by headache, shortness of breath, fatigue, and eventually can cause death. Respiratory acidosis focuses on too much H+ ions in the blood and an increase in CO2 partial pressure. But another cause of acidosis has to do with the lack of bicarbonate, usually associated with vomiting and diarrhea. This is a form of metabolic acidosis when bicarbonate levels in the plasma decrease while chloride levels increase, also called hyperchloremic acidosis, and is caused by dysfunction in the kidneys rather than focusing on the lungs. In summary, we covered how CO2 is made in the body and how it is transported and expelled into the environment. Now, Pacquiao will go into how plants utilize carbon dioxide.
When carbon dioxide is released from Krebs cycle, we all know plants use it for photosynthesis. But the question is, how do plants use it? Well, there is a process in photosynthesis called Calvin cycle or dark reaction. This process has two stages: light-dependent reaction and dark reaction. In the first stage, energy from sunlight is absorbed through protein-containing pigment called chlorophyll and converted into electron carrier molecule called NADPH and ATP. This reaction takes place in the thylakoid membrane, in the granum within the chloroplast. In the second stage, which is our main focus, go through three phases. The diagram gives the summary of that reaction. When we look at this diagram, we can see it's labeled phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's exactly what happened within it. In phase 1, which is called carbon fixation, one molecule of carbon dioxide reacts with 5-carbon sugar called ribulose biphosphate. The enzyme ribulose 1,5-biphosphate carboxylase oxygenase, better known as Robisco, catalyzes the carboxylation of ribulose biphosphate to make excess carbon compound that splits in half to form 2,3-phosphoglycerate molecules. The enzyme phosphoglycerate kinase catalyzes phosphorylation of 3-phosphoglycerate to form 1,3-biphosphogycerate. So this is what happened in the phase. And phase 2, which is also called reduction reaction, the enzyme glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate dehydrogenase catalyzes the reduction of 1,3-biphosphogycerate by NADPH. Then we move to the phase 3. Ribulose phase 3, which is the regeneration of ribulose 1,5-biphosphate. At the end of the regeneration, the net gain of the set of reaction is 1 glyceraldehyde and 3-phosphate molecule per 3-carbon dioxide molecule. So these three phases come up and generate all in return generate the glucose that the plant needs to contribute to the its photosynthesis. And these phases in the reaction actually restart again and repeat itself. So as long as carbon dioxide is coming out and plant getting them, it will repeat itself. That's why there's the saying that goes that when the last plant die, the last man will die, because plant and animal depend on each other. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Thanks.